able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Glad to be here today to talk about regulatory strategy. My name is Tiara Aderaje. I graduated from Xavier University of Louisiana, so I'm always happy to see another Xavierite. But anyway, I'm happy to see so many people who are interested in industry, interested in learning about regulatory. So we can go ahead and get into it. Okay. So first of all, let's start off by talking about what regulatory affairs is. So regulatory affairs is a profession within a pharmaceutical company or a contracting or consulting company that's responsible for obtaining approval of new pharmaceutical products or medical devices. In regulatory affairs, we ensure that approval is maintained for as long as the product is on the market. In order to properly do this, regulatory affairs professionals oversee how therapeutics and medical devices are developed, tested, manufactured, marketed, and distributed to certify that these products meet regulatory standards for human use. So I know that that was a lot of information, but the long and short of it is that regulatory affairs professionals are involved in everything from development to marketing of a drug product. In the spirit of that, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a highlight of what happens in the life cycle of a therapeutic product. So you start off in drug discovery. We have a lot of compounds there, but only a few make it to the preclinical phase. Preclinical is also called non-clinical. Here, this is where you're testing that drug in animals or in vivo and vitro cells. This whole process in itself takes quite some time. After you have a product that looks like it'll be viable, you'll submit an investigational new drug application to the health authority. There, you'll pretty much ask the agency for permission to go ahead and move forward into a clinical trial. In phase 1, you're testing in healthy volunteers. And then once you kind of have enough safety information from that, you'll move over to phase 2, which includes safety and efficacy. And then once you kind of get enough information from phase 2, you'll move to phase 3. If you're lucky, not very many drug products make it past phase 2. And you'll kind of increase the patient population. You'll have many volunteers. And so this entire process takes quite some time as well. Once you have plenty of information for the agency, you'll go to them, you'll submit a new drug application, and you'll ask for permission to market that product. And so not very many products make it this far. It's kind of a miracle. It's kind of like, it's very rare in all honesty, to make it to the NDA stage. So once you have your FDA review, could take anywhere from 10 to 12 months. You'll get that final approval and you'll be able to move forward to marketing and manufacturing that drug. I know as PharmDs, most of us are involved with the drug at this end stage, right? When we're already talking about safety after the drug is on the market or once it's in the pharmacy. But a lot of years go into a drug product being able to make it to market. So just kind of wanted to highlight that a little bit. Okay, I also wanted to talk about some functions within regulatory affairs at large. So I know we're here to talk about regulatory strategy today, but there's also regulatory chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. There's regulatory labeling. I know pharmacists are really familiar with the label. I'm talking about the PI and the USPI. This is developed in regulatory. Regulatory writing also kind of drafts all of the information that gets shared with the health authority. We also have a regulatory project management group. We have an advertising and promotion group. So when it comes to the commercials that you see online, when it comes to the ads that you see on your Instagram, these sorts of conversations with the agency happen within this group. There's regulatory operations. So regulatory operations kind of submits all of the data from the clinical trials to the health authority. And then there's regulatory intelligence that kind of does some surveying, some political work to see how the health authority is thinking about certain drug products and just trends in the pharmaceutical industry at large. So lots of functions within regulatory affairs, but today we'll talk about regulatory strategy. So what is reg strategy, and then what do strategists do? Regulatory strategists are the liaison between the sponsor, which is the pharma company, and the health authority. And so when it comes to any meeting that the company wants to have with the health authority, you have to do that meeting through regulatory affairs. So we run all health authority meetings. We're also responsible for gathering, analyzing, and evaluating key information when it comes to the clinical study. So any strategic decisions that need to be made, they're made in reg affairs. So if we're talking about what competitors are doing and their drug product, when they plan to make it on market, those sorts of things, we bring that information back to the clinical teams to help us to be as strategic as well. We also ensure that processes follow local, regional, and global regulations. So, I know we're pretty familiar with FDA here, but Health Canada has their own rules. Europe has their own rules within EMA. So different regions have different rules, and we make sure in Reg Affairs that our studies are complying with all of those rules. We prepare dossiers and technical files for submissions. And so all the information that goes to the health authority, it gets reviewed by regulatory affairs. And then we also manage those post-marketing activities. So we do surveillance, we do remediation. If the agency asks for us to continue doing safety studies, we'll be sure that the clinical team, the safety team understand what that means. As far as the documents that are to be delivered to the authority and over what time frame. So there are a lot of strategic decisions to be made within a program. I just wanted to highlight a few. There's the opportunity to explore accelerated approval options. So there are a lot of benefits to having accelerated approval in your program, especially patent benefits. So when it comes to getting paid at the end of the day, sometimes you can extend the life of that patent by having accelerated approval options. Also, in Reg Affairs, we plan the regulatory interaction timing. So based on where the drug product is in its development process, we can kind of plan out the timing so that we can get the meeting materials, the briefing book, those sorts of things to the authority within a good time frame. Also, you're talking about multiple functions having to come together to talk to one agency. So it takes time to kind of get people's schedules together and really know what will be a good time for us to discuss information with the agency, ask specific questions, et cetera. We're kind of trying to understand the landscape for some of the other drug products that are on the market or drug products that may be behind us. So just kind of keeping an eye out on that. Sometimes it may be to your benefit to go for an accelerated approval to get your drug product on the market faster because someone else is coming up right behind you. So lots of decisions to be made there. And then also you want to have consideration about the target product profile, the drug label at the end of the day. As the program is being developed, you can kind of have a target label to ensure that you are reaching the goals that need to be reached so that whenever you get on market, you're still competitive. You're still able to really fill a void that exists within the market. And so all of that said, regulatory strategy requires a global perspective. And so I wanted to include this slide just so you guys could see that although we're used to talking about FDA a lot, every country just about has its own health authority, and all of these countries have their own rules. So it takes a lot of strategy, it takes a lot of organization to be sure that your global company is complying with all of these opinions and rules. It also takes you being a cross-functional and regional collaborator. So you have to know how to talk to people. You have to be personable. It's some of those soft skills that really get you far in regulatory affairs. This isn't a comprehensive list of every health authority, but I did want to give you a picture. So you may be asking yourself, like, I'm interested in reg affairs. I might want to be a strategist. What skills can I develop right now to help me be good at this? A lot of this you can do while you're studying for your exams, while you're kind of becoming the person that you're hoping to becoming for your future self. So you can develop a high attention to detail. This is going to be important because you're going to be reviewing a lot of documents when you get into pharma. So when you're reviewing your exams, when you're reviewing your material for your exams, you can develop that high attention to detail and it will be second nature to you. You also want to have a mindset of lifelong learning. You want to be a long view thinker, and you want to be flexible. So with regulatory affairs, no regulation is done and dusted, right? The regulations are moving quite often. You're having to stay on top of the information that the agency is releasing. So lifelong learning is a given. Um, you're working on programs with long view thinking, as we talked about earlier. You know, these programs are 10 years long sometimes. And so you're not going to see immediate results all of the time, but you'll see results along the way. And then you'll also want to be flexible, because as these programs develop, as the market changes, things happen. You got to be able to roll with the punches. Project management skills go a long way in regulatory affairs. Just being able to kind of keep record of your emails, keep record of the deliverables that you've submitted and the deliverables that have gone out to other team members, staying on top of following up for things that are due, that sort of thing will take you a long way. If you can develop it now and it be second nature, you will have one less thing to worry about once you start working. Great communication and collaboration skills is also really important. And then critical thinking and analytical thinking is really important when it comes to being a regulatory strategist. So I did want to share a little bit about where regulatory has taken me. And I've only been in regulatory affairs for 4 years. So I started in regulatory project management. And the great thing about regulatory project management is it gives you insight into all of the functions within pharma, depending on the company you're working for, but it'll give you insight into what everybody does. So I will always suggest that someone who's looking to get into pharma look into project management at large, but regulatory project management as well. You'll kind of get a taste for what everybody does, and it'll just kind of affirm where your skills are. After leaving that company, I joined my current company, and I started working in US regulatory strategy and submissions, which was a great experience, learned so much. Programs move fast and you gotta be with it. And so eventually I decided to move to the Canadian team and do the same sort of work, but I got to work on CTAs instead of INDs, kind of understanding how other health authorities think and move the programs forward. It's quite interesting because working for a company, US, you're gonna make a lot of money when your drug product gets on the market in the US because we market. And so it's interesting to see how the company takes a lot of things from a US perspective. Working on an auxiliary program is a little bit different, but you got to fight for your voice and what's relevant in your region. And then because of working in Canada, I'm now beginning to work on some regulatory labeling in Canada. So all this to say, you got to be flexible. Things happen and you're going to get experiences to add to your belt, and it ends up being useful. So it's really important to just kind of go with the punches. Don't be too fixed about what you're hoping to do. Take that long view, because things will roll into the place that they should go into. I also wanted to provide a few resources for you guys. So if you're not aware, Duke has a free regulatory affairs training program, and the cohort is going to start soon in April. So find this website, go sign up. It'll give you high-level information about what's going on in regulatory affairs and kind of how to speak the lingo. I think that'll be really important. I also included a link for just the overall drug development process. You can kind of have that under your belt as you're interviewing whatever. It'll give you more of a presence. And then I also included the NIH toolbox, and this toolbox just kind of includes the documents that are required for an initial drug application, so investigational drug application. So these 3 things will have you well on your way to getting your first position in regulatory strategy if you're interested in that. So that is everything that I have for you guys today. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. That was so helpful. And thank you so much, Pharmaco, for adding those links in there. You must have been reading my mind. We have one question so far, and it is, what is a dossier?
A dossier is a submission package. So just everything that the study has all the data that's been collected from the study over time. You collate it and you submit it to the agency according to certain rules and requirements. There's a folder and a position for everything. It's called the ECTD.
Awesome, thank you. Does anyone, oh, Debbie, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, hi. I'm actually currently an intern at Beijing. So yeah, nice to see you. I'm currently contracting in Reg CMC. So I was wondering how you arrived to the sub-functional area of strategy, or if you would consider like switching as your career progresses, and how is that perceived? Thank you.
Yeah, it's not common. I mean, it's pretty common within pharma to move where you see fit. I think it's good to kind of test the grounds of different departments. So after project management, I was just looking for something different. And so that's how I landed on strategy. I knew that I was looking to have some FDA interactions, some health authority interactions under my belt. I thought that that would be good for the steps that I have in my future career plan. And so I applied to strategy positions and Beijing worked out. But CMC is incredible. The information that you guys work with is complex and really needed. And so I would say if you're able to, spend some time there, spend a year, spend 2 years there before you make another move. But it's all about just kind of creating your career plan and being okay with learning every step of the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, good evening. My name is Peter. So glad to be here, and thank you guys uh, uh, for the invite. My question is, so I have a rotation right now. I'm currently a P4 with AmerisourceBergen, and I was gonna ask, how often does regulatory affairs like play a role in drug shortages? Because I did a project with that, and I was reading upon like regulatory affairs playing a fact with like drug shortages. How often do you see that like plays a role with that?
The way that I see drug shortages handled in my current role is when it comes to the clinical study. So there are some studies that may be comparing the product that the company owns to other products on the market. Maybe they want that first line indication. Maybe they want superiority to be on their label, what have you. And so when comparing, I've seen situations where there are drug shortages and we have to, maybe drug shortages for the branded product. So we have to move to a generic product. Or maybe the branded product is not available in this region because approvals are regional. You'll have to supplement with something else. And so that's pretty much the only way that I've come across drug shortages. But I would say that that is largely handled by the supply chain group. And so at least in Canada, the requirement is just to inform the Canadian authorities of the drug product that's intended to be used in that study. So you just kind of give them an update of we've switched from X to Z.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your question, Peter. It looks like we also have a question from Romita Das, and that is, do you think working in clinical trial roles and or quality assurance would be beneficial for gaining experience to go into regulatory affairs? Or are clinical or QA roles more separate routes from regulatory?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say for pharma at large, get in where you fit in, like have that flexible mindset and just start where you are. I think at the end of the day, pharma experience can be translated to other roles. So starting in quality assurance, starting in QA, it's a good way to get into regulatory. I think eventually you'll need to be able to speak to having touched regulatory topics and ideas. But depending on the company that you're at, you may get that opportunity within QA. QA and regulatory are not that far apart from each other. And you may get that experience in some clinical roles, maybe a CRA role or something to that effect. So don't doubt it, stick with it if you're there, or if you're hoping to target that, it'll translate for sure.
Awesome, thank you so much. So we have another question from Michael McShan, and he said, did you find any specific resources particularly helpful when you first started in strategy that allowed the transition from project management to be easier?
It's a good question. I think the good thing about project management is that I was able to touch things very easily from a distance. So I already had the level 1 knowledge. I would say the thing that made the difference for me between the transition from management to strategy was actually having a good manager. I'm somebody who kind of likes to be taught. And so having a great manager who was able to say, like, you already understand this. This is where we're moving to next, and kind of like building that bridge as I connected the dots, doing my research and things like that, made that transition really easier. So when it comes to resources, you can read regs, you can do what you need to do based on the programs that you're on. But largely it's going to be having a good manager or mentor, from my experience at least.
Great, thank you so much. And that was a great question. I definitely do think that it's important. Like you said, like your network is your net worth. So that's awesome. And let's see, Amisha, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, so I'm currently a P3 and I have a rotation coming up soon, like later this year, in regulatory strategy. So I was just wondering if you have any advice on like how to prepare for that rotation, just like going into it.
That's good. It's a good question. I think as a P3 going on to a rotation, it's going to be important to ask really detailed questions. It's going to be important to ask to sit in as many meetings as you can and just kind of listen and observe. And then after you kind of get that experience of listening, to go back to your preceptor and ask those specific questions. I don't think, I haven't interned in reg strategy, so I'm not sure the level of work that they'll be giving you, but they're probably going to give you some initial regulations to read about certain forms that have to be filled out and what the requirements are for keeping a study active, that sort of thing. So my number one thing for you is to make sure that you develop a good relationship with your preceptor and ask important questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, and don't forget about that ORAC class as well. That's also open to students. So you have that opportunity. I'm not sure when your appy gets started, but best of luck. So I did have a question, because it does seem like we do have a good mix of P1s to P4s on the call. I know you talked about your journey and how you got into pharma, but did you get a fellowship? Was fellowship on the table for you? Or how exactly was your first role in project management?
Yeah, so I did not do a fellowship. I blitz applied to so many companies just trying to get an opportunity. So for me, I was targeting contract organizations or CROs essentially. And that's how I ended up getting my foot into the door. I'd say that a CRO is a great entry point for somebody who doesn't have a fellowship. If you didn't get a fellowship, or if you're trying to get a fellowship and it doesn't work out, don't feel like it's the end of the world. There are opportunities outside of it. But I'd say that a CRO is a great option because they have to train you, they have to teach you. You're going to be working on multiple programs for different companies, so you'll get to touch a lot and see what disease states you enjoy, what the endpoints are for those sorts of disease states, that sort of thing. It just comes with a lot of flexibility. So I'd say, yeah, go the CRO route if you're able. You can take a contract position if that works out as well. But I will admit that the market is quite saturated right now, quite challenging to get into. And so it's going to take some grit. I'd say whatever you can get into, just get there, stay there for a few years, get that experience, put it on your resume, and then consider what you want to do next as you're learning.
Thank you. That's definitely great advice. And very true that the market is very saturated right now. So.
I have another question. When you first transitioned into your new non-traditional role, how long did it like take you to get comfortable? You know, what challenges did you face, and like how was the support in terms of like your team members, you know, getting familiar with your current role?
It's a good question. It's a good question. Um, I will joke and say that I've felt comfortable many times, but I recently told my manager this week, I was like, I know what I'm doing in my job now. So I think because the roles change so often, and because the information is updated so often, and because you're being thrown new challenges so often, there's often a period of just like feeling like you're sinking. And then once you get a handle of it, kind of rising to the top. But the transition between a pharmacy school and working, I'd say it took me the full year to really know what I was doing. And even still, there was so much more to learn. So just kind of hopping into it with a can-do attitude makes a big difference. I will say, working in corporate America, there are three things that are necessary for you to be successful. You have to be visible within your company for sure. You have to be likable for sure, and then you have to be competent. So you do those three things to the best of your ability. You do your work whenever you can. You do your work on the side if you need to. If you feel like you're not measuring up to the standard that you set for yourself, you got to go do some reading on your own time. But also whenever you present yourself to your coworkers, you need to present as a competent person and a likable person, because just being likable gets you so far in life.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question fully?
Yeah, that was nice.
No worries.
Oops, sorry. That was a great question and a great response. Thank you. I actually did have another question when going through your presentation, which was so informative. So you talked about how you spent time on the strategy perspective from the US and then moved into the more global realm. Can you kind of talk about the differences in roles of being a strategist on the US level versus global?
Yeah, I'd say the major difference is that companies are designed to target US success. Or at least the company that I'm working for seems to be designed to target US success often. So just kind of fighting for your region is the biggest thing. I'd say also each region has their own terminology, their own guidances, their own rules. Um, and so there are different requirements. At the end of the day, whenever you're working for a global company and you have one drug product, you have a study that's done in multiple countries, you have to go with the most stringent countries' requirements. So I'll give an example. For right now, the FDA is focused on diversity in clinical trials, which is a great initiative. Um, we are a company that does some of our clinical trials in China as well. And so and the disease states that we have are pretty prevalent in the Chinese population. And so it's a challenge to make sure that the numbers balance out according to FDA requirements, even though you know you have a high population that's interested in your study elsewhere. So it takes a little bit of strategy, it takes a little bit of know-how to kind of shut down a study over here, increase the numbers over here, reach patients that maybe, you know, sometimes these studies do not occur in certain or certain racial ethnicities. And so trying to get numbers that are significant enough in that arena can be a challenge. So it takes a little bit of strategy. I'd say that's one of the biggest differences between US and global strategy. Some other minor differences is just the USPI has different requirements than the PM, than the SMPC for EU. Um, when it comes to approval, the timelines are different for different drug products. And the review structures are different as well. So just kind of getting together, collaborating with your cross-functional team members or your other regulatory regional leads, and creating a strategy that leads to us understanding where targets will be hit, so that we can be successful in the long run.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
I have a question for you. Could you possibly walk us through like a day-to-day, if we were in your shoes, your day-to-day lifestyle, and how you anticipate and adapt to like upcoming regulatory changes in like the pharmacy sector? So if you could just kind of walk us through like your day-to-day kind of lifestyle of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
On a day-to-day basis, okay?
Even throughout the week.
It depends on the day. So currently in my role, I'm the representative for our Canadian studies. So day to day, I'm probably spending about 3 hours in different various meetings for the various programs that we have. Some of those meetings are for maintenance activities. Some of those meetings are for go mode activities. We're getting ready to submit a major filing to the health authority. And some of those meetings are to prepare for meetings with the agency. So about 3 of those 8 hours spent just talking to people about what we're going to do or what we have done or what we plan to do. Let's say the remaining 5, I'm going to have a lunch. I'm going to spend some time, going for a walk, whatever, taking breaks throughout the day, but also spending a lot of time reading up on what I need to know for what we hope to accomplish in our programs. Also just kind of doing some of the routine archiving work and the routine email work related to the programs. So I don't want to give too much information about my specific company, but day to day, a lot of collaboration and a lot of preparation, I'd say.
Thank you.
I am, when Tatiana added in the chat, work-life balance, I am someone who's going to close my computer at 5 p.m. if I can. There are times where you have to hustle and there are times where you have to get things done. But most of the times, the email can wait until tomorrow and it's okay.
Hi, Tiara. Before I jumped in, I want to give anybody else a chance, anybody in the audience, to also ask their questions as well. I definitely had a question for you, but I first and foremost want to say thank you for being here, and so sorry for my tardiness, a little bit of emergency, but we're okay now. But yes, before I did jump in with the question, I want to see if there's anybody else in the audience that did have a question as well. Please feel free to either throw it in the chat or come up with a mute and say your question as well.
Oh, my last question was going to be, are you still RPH? Like, do you still have your license?
I do not. I let it lapse.
That was my last one.
No problem, no problem. But thank you again. So quick question. I heard you kind of talking about cross-functionality. And forgive me if you talked about this during your presentation. Well, first and foremost, let's jump back. My name is Matthew Otule. I don't think we got an opportunity to meet. My name is Matthew Otule. One of the co-founders here with the Pharma Collective, and we cannot thank you enough for being here. But going back to my original question, so you kind of spoke a little bit about cross-functionality, and I think that this is always like a huge topic, especially kind of going into pharma and like when you're kind of going into fellowships and kind of trying to choose what I guess function you want to go into. It's always important to start thinking about cross-functionality. But can you kind of discuss or talk about how regulatory affairs kind of fits into that overall drug development process? Like how does it kind of go into like the overall strategy of a product, and like how does it fit with the other functions as well?
Yeah, sure. So it's a big question.
A bit of a much there. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So when it comes to reg affairs, let's take it back to the functions that are commonly understood in pharma. So we have reg affairs, we have clinical development, we have clinical operations, we have safety. when it comes to the clinical phase of drug development, I'd say that those are some of the key players. You have some biostatistics, that sort of thing. You got some pharmacology sometimes. When it comes to the clinical phase, that's what I would say. Those are the folks who are really involved. And so what regulatory affairs does is in the clinical study, there are regular meetings called CSTs, at least at my company, where you're discussing the progress of the study. Clin development and clin ops is going to tell you, we got these many patients to this site is opening on this day. So there's this communication about what's happening in that clinical study. Regulatory affairs takes that information and they ensure that all of the materials that are needed in that region are submitted to the health authorities so that that study is compliant. So you need to have the PI, the principal investigators, CBs, and their just their forms that say that they're able to work in the US, their 1572s. You need to have the protocol and you need to have consents from the patients that they want to be in this study and they agree to the terms of the study. So all of these activities are being managed by clinical operations. Clinical development will be tweaking the protocol as the study goes on, and they'll kind of see that this is happening in this patient, or we're having this positive signal, so let's highlight this, or maybe, I don't know, maybe we have this great outcome, so let's compare it directly to another program that's on the market, another product that's on the market, and show that we're better than them. So you'll tweak the protocol, you'll tweak the study so that you can get the results that you're looking for at the end of the drug's development phase. So with that, regulatory affairs takes that protocol, we go to the health authority and we say, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. It's an amendment to the protocol that was already submitted. Hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. Is this acceptable in your eyes? Is it safe for patients, et cetera? There are some conversations that happen within the team before we go to the health authority to kind of say, I don't know if the agency is going to do this. We saw in this other study that they didn't like this. So I would suggest that we do this instead, those sorts of strategic decisions. So after that's kind of clarified, we'll send it to the health authority. Typically they'll say, change this or that, or they'll say, this is not okay, do not move forward, that sort of thing. We go back to the CST and we help them make those changes for the program to be successful. So I say that that is some of the day-to-day work that's happening in Reg Affairs. Some one-off work is with Reg Affairs and Med Affairs, Reg Affairs and commercial. And in those instances, you have a drug product that pretty much has great readout, pretty much you understand that the data is going to be positive. You've submitted this information to the health authority. You're waiting for their answer on the review. So now you're strategizing to blitz the market as soon as you have that approval. So you'll be reviewing the marketing materials to ensure that the information listed is accurate, it's complete, it's non-biased, what have you. You'll also be discussing with the clinical teams about the product monograph or the USPI, because the MSLs are going to take that monograph and they're going to go talk to physicians. They're going to go make sure that the physician understands what they can do with this medication in their patient population. So the cross collaboration comes in the development of that product monograph or USPI before that label, before it's approved, to ensure that it works for the commercial teams so that they can go be competitive when they blitz the market. Yeah, there are a lot of little things that happen with Reg Affairs, but you just kind of hop from program to program. You do what needs to be done. You're flexible along the way, and you treat people with kindness. You end up trying to like your coworkers. You don't have to love them, like them, and it helps you a lot.
Absolutely. No, that was a beautiful breakdown. I really kind of like how you really touched on each part of that. So really, thank you so much for that. Another, not really of a follow-up question, but another question. So I am someone, funny enough that you say with the MSL, I am someone who's looking to kind of go down that path. And now that I'm kind of completing my fellowship, I'm seeing that there's a lot that I didn't really expect with the role, right? Like there's, I had an idea about the role before I kind of went into it, but now that I'm near the end and hopefully, fingers crossed, getting a job soon, I'm realizing that there's things about the job that I just didn't expect. So were there things about kind of your role that you kind of, after you got the job, that you didn't really expect for it to happen? Not necessarily does that have to be good or bad, but just something that you didn't really expect to kind of be whenever you got that role?
Yeah, of course. I think the whole idea of pharma itself was an expectation for me, if that's a word. It's hard to fully understand things until you get into it. And so just kind of getting into regulatory affairs, I'm discovering new things all the time. Some of it great, some of it not so great. But what I will say is I am so thrilled by the level of detail that these health authorities have with companies, because it really shows me that the health authorities are really trying to protect patients. And so if there's anything that I kind of say is that FDA has your back, like people who don't like them, like don't do that. These people got your back. So it's some of those little things that I've kind of learned like over time within my career.
Definitely being someone who FDA just kind of turned down one of our products. It's hard to believe that the FDA has our back. But no, that's great though. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any more questions? I do have one that I think could be helpful to the P4s, but I do want to first see if anyone on the chat does have any questions that they would like to get answered. It could be about pharmacy school, reg strategy, regulatory affairs as a whole. So please don't be shy.
I got a question.
Thank
So,
you.
just kind of backtracking towards the cross functionality and the different roles that you interact with on a weekly basis. Me myself being clin dev, I know there's a couple of times I'll come in contact with people on reg affairs, and this is kind of more specific, but like in your position in reg strategy, how do you deal with documents such as like coming in from health authorities such as like RFIs? And for those who are not familiar with RFIs, they're kind of like requests for information. So like what stage of the process do you kind of like deal with that? Because you kind of gave us the breakdown of like everything that happens like right before the trial starts or right like as the trial started up. So like where does RFIs and things that documents of that sort come into play?
It's a good question. That's a large part of my job, actually. I can't believe I forgot that. So RFIs come into play whenever you're making an update, whenever you're submitting an initial application, when you're making an update to the study, and whenever you are submitting a marketing application. So at that IND phase, throughout the study, when you're making any changes to the protocol, and then also whenever you submit the final package to the health authority. So the management of the request for information is quite a hectic process. You kind of got to drop everything else and get it done because the timelines are often short. So the health authority will come to you with a specific question. They'll say, this data says this, we can't recalculate that, whatever number you got, show us how you did it, or something to that effect. And you've got to collaborate with the team that the question is directed toward in order to get the answer. So it might be ClinPharm, it might be your statistics team, they might need clarity on your tables, listings, and figures. They might, I don't know, want you to slow down your drug process and ensure that you're using the correct dose for the study that you're running. So yeah, the questions that come vary just based on the authorities' questions. Like I said, FDA wants to have protect the patients that are in the study. They want to protect the patient population. So you got to answer them with urgency so you can continue and reach success. So yeah.
Thank you for that answer. And I guess this is just a quick, funny question, but how many questions have you seen come in the RFI? Because I've heard like RFIs have, depending on the health authority, the number of questions could span from anywhere from like 10 to like, I heard 70 before, so.
I haven't seen a 70. I will say some of our earlier development programs have large numbers of questions. I work mostly on mid-stage and late-stage programs, so when we get questions, we often don't get very many. But also I worked on a submission that it was a specific pathway. So it included all of the information for the US, well, for the Canadian region, the Switzerland region, and then the UK region. So that response document, I think we had 25 questions. And so that was a doozy. But I will say, because it was a collaboration between all those three health authorities, we had 60 days to answer it. So it was enough days to collaborate, get good answers, and then submit it with plenty of time left over.
Nice, thank you.
Awesome. You are just dropping all the gems and I'm loving it. I'm learning a lot myself about strategy. And I have one question, I think maybe to close out. And I know you said you talked about with Peter that your RPH that you decided to make the decision to let it lapse. Can you kind of I know there might be some P4s on the call or younger students who are like, okay, great, now I don't have to take the NAPLEX, myself included. So I was wondering if you have any advice to people or just something that they should maybe consider, whether or not when they are deciding if they should take the NAPLEX or if they shouldn't, or if they should maintain their license, given the current state of pharma.
It's a good question. I think it's definitely a personal question. I'd ask you to ask yourself what kind of life you want to live, how you hope to show up in the world, how you want to contribute to your future family, those sorts of things. If you think you need flexibility, then get your license, keep it on deck, and just kind of see how that plays out. I'd say for me, once I got into pharma and I saw the opportunities that existed, it was a no-brainer, but that doesn't have to be everyone's answer. So you really just ask yourself what you want out of your career. I just want to remind everyone, your career is only a part of you. Don't define yourself fully by your career. But it really is up to how you hope to show up in the world, what you want out of your career, those sorts of things. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure I take that for myself too. I'm almost 1 year out and deciding whether or not, taking taking the NAPLEX, but like you said, it's a personal journey. So I think we have one more question, and this might actually be for myself and the co-fellows. It was sent directly to me. It was a question regarding pharmacy school. This person was wondering if the industry experience impacts the roles that we are interested in applying for as a fellowship, because they are doing an APPE in medical affairs since their school doesn't offer a large amount of industry experience, but they're more interested towards regulatory affairs and the commercial side of industry. So I can go ahead and answer that because I actually am on the commercial side of industry in regulatory affairs. So I did not have that experience when I first started going into my fellowship, but I think what really set me apart to get that fellowship was having a clear understanding of what exactly the role entails, and also still showing what applicable experiences or transferable skills you got. So even though maybe you're not interested in medical affairs, you'll be able to talk about exactly how you are able to have cross-functional interactions with regulatory affairs or with your commercial colleagues and what have you. So if you have any questions about your APPE or going into your fellowship, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We actually did have a series last year focusing and helping students with their APPE. So if you do want to take a peek at any of our past recordings, we also have that on our YouTube as well. But I do think it's definitely possible. And if there are people that are on the call and they don't have any experience, and maybe they're approaching their 4th year and don't have anything lined up, you're still just as qualified as someone else who maybe has 5 APPEs, 3 APPEs in the pharma space. As long as you're able to sell yourself and show the applicable skills that you have, that we have as pharmacists innately, you'll do just fine. So hopefully that helps. If everyone could please give a virtual round of applause to Dr. Aderaje for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time out of your 9 to 5 and just being here with us today. We really appreciate you and for driving the mission of the Pharma Collective. For our first comers, from our returners, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to get more information, please go on @the on Instagram and follow us, and then follow us on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much, and I hope you all have a good night.